again, we need to be holistically, we need to have an agreement and a code of conduct in order to understand that not only do black people deserve this money for slavery reparations, right? But once we are able to get this money, we have to know exactly what to do with this money, how to invest, and make sure we're not dependent on the dominant white society's resources. All right, family, you already know what it is. Chauncey, aka GMOGMedia, with another GMOGMedia spotlight. All right, family, with this topic, I want to talk about reparations. I want to talk about black people and slavery reparations. Are we ready to receive monetary compensation for over 400 years of atrocities caused by the dominant white society? Right? That's what I want to talk about today, family. And before I start, if you're new to the channel, please subscribe. Once again, I am Chauncey, aka Ukarema GMOGMedia. I talk about issues that pertain to black people collectively as a group. I also talk about issues pertaining to systematic racism, which is white supremacy, in this country and around the world. So if you are new to this channel, please subscribe. I also offer suggestions on ending racism, white supremacy with the system of justice. Anyway, family, reparations. Slavery reparations. Are we ready to receive monetary compensation? That's the question I have. And it's up to you guys to answer that myself. I'm just offering my opinion on, are we ready? So the thing is that, family, we're past, in my opinion, we're past the question, do we deserve reparations? Of course we deserve reparations. Like I mentioned before, over 400 years of atrocities caused by the dominant white society. All right, we are behind the 8 ball on all 9 areas of activity. That's economics, education, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war. Not to mention laws that further disenfranchised, marginalized, subjugated us, mistreated us, Jim Crow, Reconstruction, all right, etc., etc. And you had companies that are benefiting, that have benefited from the slave trade, that benefited from slavery, that are still existent till this day. All right, over 400 years of free labor for this country. Black people built this country. All right, so that's not the question. Is not that we don't deserve the money, deserve slavery reparations. The question is, are we ready to receive that money? That's the question I have. And so I want to talk about that, family. In my opinion, right, we have a long way to go in terms of receiving monetary compensation for slavery in this country. The reason why is because, like I said, we're so behind the 8 ball in all 9 areas of activity, where the average black person, right, if you give them a whole bunch of money, okay, the average black person collectively as a group, they would know it. They would know what to do exactly with that money if they receive millions of dollars. Okay, so the first thing, in my opinion, we have to do, we have to have financial literacy awareness. Okay, before we receive that money, we have to have some kind of criteria where we have to meet guidelines before we receive this particular money for slavery reparations. All right, financial literacy is number one. And I'm talking about myself too, because I'm not the best at managing money. You know, I'm married. My wife is the one that really is the financial manager of our money. And so I'm not the best at that. So a lot of black people, like I said, are in the same position as far as not having financial awareness on how to invest, how to save, etc., what stuff to buy, when to buy, things of that nature. We collectively as a group really don't have that kind of education. And that's where financial literacy comes into place. And so one of the criteria is, like I say, to receive compensation for the atrocities that are happening to black people till this day, being mistreated, being shot down in cold blood by so-called police officers, aka race soldiers in this country. All right, subjugation, being disenfranchised, okay, marginalized, mistreated, etc., that's still happening till this day. We are affected, which puts us behind the 8 ball collectively as a group, because we were taught, including myself, we were taught to work, get a job, work for a white-owned company, work for the company for 30 years, retire, get our pension, and call it a day. That's what we were taught. All right, you go to a Jewish family, right, who they received their reparations from Germany, over $60 billion. When they received that money, family, they built their own communities. You go to a Jewish community, they run their banks, they run their school system, they run their government. That is a community, because they control the resources of where they live. When you have a black neighborhood, which is really a black neighborhood, not a black community, you have a pocket of black people, right, who are living in an area where that's what they're doing. They're just living, but they don't own or control anything. So it's just a black neighborhood, not a community. Like I mentioned before, these communities that are populated by black people, the black dollar only circulates 6 hours. 6 hours in these so-called black communities, which is really black neighborhoods. So the black dollar circulates 6 hours. That's it. In other communities, they circle 3, 4, 5, 10 times longer than a so-called black community, right? And so again, we're so far behind the 8 ball in terms of that, in terms of financial literacy, financial awareness, what to do with the money that you receive, etc. And this article, that I'll have it on the screen as well, indicates an average of what compensations that each descendant of a slave in the U.S. should receive. All right, and this is from blackagendareport.com. Quote, calculating reparations, $1.5 million for each slave descendant in the U.S. Now, there's been reports as far as how much, black people who were descendants of slaves in this country, the actual total amount has come up to the trillions of dollars, right? So the average descendant of a slave in terms of getting the receiving and compensation of the money, which is $1.5 million. Again, we wouldn't know what to do with that money because we're not financially educated on how to invest, what to do with the money, how to start a business, etc. We need to be taught, and again, I was speaking to myself as well. We need to be taught how to do that. All right, because again, we don't need to depend on the dominant white society's resources. We don't. We need to wean ourselves off, and that includes everything. I'm talking about how you watch me right now, YouTube. We need to get off that. In terms of the technologies that you use, because I always talk about technology, information technology, computers, etc., is something that black people need to invest in. Black people need to build companies in. Black people need to start working in. Technology is the now and the future, but that's only one part of the 9 areas of activity that we need to work on. We need to work on other areas of activity as well, right? So building a parallel economy is very important, very crucial. That's a part of economics. All right. Now, to get off of that, you have black people who don't even acknowledge slavery. You have black people who are in religious groups or religious ideologies, beliefs, doctrines, etc., who wouldn't even acknowledge slavery, or the ones who are in so-called these other religions, etc., they know about slavery, but they just don't want to partake in receiving handouts from the government, etc. So you have a lot of division in these religious beliefs. So again, we need to be holistically, we need to have an agreement and a code of conduct in order to understand that not only do black people deserve this money for slavery reparations, right? But once we are able to get this money, we have to know exactly what to do with this money, how to invest and make sure we're not dependent on the dominant white society's resources. All right. So the thing about it is, family, is that, like I mentioned to you before in that report, each slave descendant gets $1.5 million. The average black person would not know what to do with that money. Okay, so financial literacy is very, very crucial. All right, we need to also follow a code of conduct, okay, that establishes rules and guidelines on once we receive that money, what are we going to do with that money? All right, and with so many atrocities that's happening today amongst black people in this country and around the world, I think to get the ball rolling, and this is following Dr. Claude Anderson's model as well, and I agree with this model in terms of we need to follow the model of getting that money by getting the blueprint from the so-called Native Americans. The so-called Native Americans, they established the fact that they were a nation. That's number one. They said they were a nation. They said that this is our land. This is our sovereign land. That's what we need to do. We need to establish that, for one, we are a nation. Black people are a nation. The term African American is a made-up term by Jesse Jackson. All right. The term black, Negro, or colored, another made-up term by the dominant white society. So we need to establish collectively as a group a identification for us so that we can identify ourselves as a nation. All right. This is our land. Okay. This so-called United States of America, this is our land. Okay, we are indigenous to this country. The so-called Native Americans, black people were here, okay, way before the so-called Native Americans. Okay, look up the Folsom people. All right, the Folsom people were here way before any so-called Native Americans were here. Just look that up. So we can claim that this is our land. That's number one, which gives us sovereignty. All right, and so also bringing up sovereignty, we were actually promised, okay, during post emancipation, we were promised 40 acres and a mule, but that was a lie. We never received 40 acres and a mule. So we need to establish that, for one, this is our sovereign land. Now, back in the day, we tried to go to United Nations, et cetera, and issue a crime of humanity to the United Nations, you know, pertaining genocide amongst black people, et cetera. We need to revisit that, and we need to have a focal point of a plan of attack on how to make sure we get this money. All right, and once we have a plan of attack on getting this money, we have to go back and make sure once we get the money, we have to know what to do with the monetary compensation for slavery reparations. That's how we establish a sustaining and a parallel economy against the dominant white society. Because if we're not doing this, family, we're going to be back in the bottom of the total pool collectively as a group. You know, the dominant white society, once they give us that money, they're going to say, see, we gave you guys money. You guys didn't know what to do with the money. And now you're back at it again, collectively as a group. You're in the bottom of the total pole, socially, politically, et cetera, and you're asking for more handouts. Okay, so that's why it's very important for us to establish a code of conduct which includes financial literacy and making sure we're all on one accord by receiving this compensation. All right, because again, so many people from the dominant white society, collectively as a group, they have benefited from slavery still till this day. So again, we're way past the fact that, do we need the money? We're way past that. Of course we need the money. The real question is, are we ready to receive that money? And what are we going to do once we receive that money? That's the real question. But again, my suggestions are my suggestions. Let me know what you guys think as far as once we receive the money, what should we do with it? Let me know what you guys think down below. All right, family. Chauncey, aka Ukarema, Great Man of God Media, signing out. Peace.